My husband and I moved in together almost 4 years ago to a rather nice, albeit expensive apartment complex in a sort of nice part of town. We were on the 3rd floor with a large balcony that looks out onto the courtyard in which other apartments in the complex are located. Basically, you can see the other balconies and living rooms of the other tenants and open stairwells. A year went by without a hitch. My husband works at a bar, so he comes home late, while I usually make it home around 5. It is easy to get into any apartment doorway, as the complex is large and open with no security doors except the door to the apartment. This all started in August of 2016. I would be home after work chilling and watching TV. Almost always around 9:30, I could hear someone come up the stairs. Things would be quiet, and all of a sudden, loud sharp knocks on my door. I didn't move because it was startling, but eventually went to look at the people. There stood 3 people, all with black hoodies on, all seemingly staring at the people like they could see me. I did not answer the door, and after a while they left. Cue to a few weeks later, same time, but in this instance, footsteps and then loud hard bangs on the door sent my cat flying to hide. I sat frozen, but said to myself, maybe it's the police. I made it to the people, and once again, this time staring out at one person. Dark hoodie, male, white, and very, very gaunt with huge black eyes. Again, I did not answer the door and grabbed a kitchen knife that I kept by my side until my husband came home. This continued for a few weeks, and once my husband was home, he proceeded to look out the people, saw the same man, and screamed for him to leave. And he did. We called maintenance and the police, who both stated that they would do regular patrols. Everything stopped for a while, maybe 6 months during the winter, which helped me be at ease, because when all of this was happening, I was having a very hard time sleeping and stopped going out at night. However, I assumed the same man started up again, except this time, the same large bangs on the door would happen. But when I would look out the people, nobody was there. I then became horrified as I started to notice extinguished cigarette butts by the side of my door, like someone was standing and waiting. I again reported it. Security stepped up in the area, but I still did not feel safe. I was just hoping it would just stop, as I felt tortured in my own home. But as I realized 2 weeks ago, things could be much worse. At night, when I would go to bed, I would have to cross our eating area, which was right in front of our giant glass sliding door that led to our balcony. It was late at night, lights off in the apartment. As I walk by, I glance over, and across the courtyard, I see the same man standing on the landing of the stairs across the way from the 2nd to the 3rd floor, staring right at my balcony. He was just standing there, unmoved, facing in the direction of me. It was the same man at my door. I immediately went numb. My heart was racing, and I was chilled to the bone. I knew he couldn't have seen me because all of my lights were off, but I was still scared shitless. I called my husband, who rushed over, but the man had left. We filed more reports to the front office and were promised more security patrols. This same man continued to stand at the stairway, just staring into my apartment, and it has now been 2 weeks, and he does this every Friday. I am literally horrified and have been having awful nightmares about someone breaking in and strangling me in my sleep. In the description, you can find a picture of the man in the stairway. So this happened in April of this year. I live in a major city in Texas. My apartment complex is gated and in a good neighborhood, but the security isn't extremely tight. Sometimes, the gates are left open and anyone could piggyback off someone else entering with the access code. So this particular Friday evening, I go to bed about 2:30 a.m. For some odd reason, I was having trouble getting to sleep, so I put on a podcast to listen to and eventually started to doze off. I suddenly became aware of a noise that sounds like a clicking sound, but it sounds like one of my upstairs neighbors making some noise. I kind of zoned this out, as I'm used to having my neighbors staying up late on weekends. About 30 seconds later, I realize the noise is extremely repetitive and it's getting louder. I then start focusing on it more intently, trying to isolate what it could be and where it's coming from. Suddenly it hits me. It's coming from the entrance to my apartment. I leap out of bed and head to the foyer. I identify the noise right away. The lock is moving back and forth rapidly, like someone is trying to unlock the front door. I can hear that an object is inserted in the lock, and the person is jimmying it back and forth with a lot of force. I turn around immediately and head to my bedside safe, unlock it with a combination, and pull out my .357 SIG pistol loaded with a 14-round magazine. I head back to the door as I exit the bedroom. I see the lock twist and then unlatch. I immediately pointed my weapon straight ahead, knowing that if someone comes through, I will have to make a split-second reaction. I decide that if someone comes through the door, I will give them a chance to retreat, but if they do anything other than that or enter aggressively, I'm going to shoot and ask questions later. They don't enter, however, because I also locked the deadbolt. When I first moved in a year prior, I remember thinking that the deadbolt was a great security feature, and I got in a habit of always keeping it locked when I'm home. In hindsight, this decision saved me from a life or death confrontation. Upon realizing that, I approached the door and looked through the keyhole. On the other side of the door are 3 Asians, 2 men, and 1 woman. All 3 of them are wearing hoodies, so it's difficult to make out their faces. The men have objects in their hands, but I can't make out exactly what it was. The 2 men are talking back and forth, probably trying to figure out why they can't open the door, even though they have successfully opened the outside lock at this point. The woman is also talking loudly, in a way that anyone in the hallway would be able to hear her voice. She's talking in another language, and the only words that I can make out are apartment 250, and she keeps repeating that over and over again, like a broken record. Upon hearing that, I start to wonder for a moment if they're just drunk and have the wrong apartment number, but that's impossible. To open my lock, they would have to have a copy of my exact key or some kind of lock-picking device. I've never copied my key or given it to anyone. Here's the other thing. Not only is 250 not my apartment number, but as I figured out later, that apartment number doesn't exist anywhere in the complex. Standing back from the door, I take a long broom handle and jab it hard into the face of the door, letting them know that I'm on the other side. They immediately stop fiddling with the lock and take off running. I debate whether to call 911, but decide against it unless they return. I knew they would be long gone by the time anyone gets here. It would also be too risky to follow them to try to get a better description or license plate, and I don't have enough identifying info to make an arrest. I did, however, file a police report the next day and let the apartment management know. They said it was unusual, but they would alert the resource officer and ask for a police presence for a couple of nights. Nothing ever did come of the report, but that's not really a surprise to me. They say you don't really know what you'll do in those situations until it really happens, but I can honestly say that I am proud how I stayed calm and was mentally prepared to defend myself. If there's one good thing that came out of this, I feel confident that I responded the right way and was ready for the unthinkable. So 3 a.m. burglars and your female accomplice, let's not meet again. And for your own sake, please find a safer way to make a living. There's nothing in my apartment worth dying for. A bit of backstory. I recently moved to a new city and I love the apartment I have. It's a street-facing unit in a renovated brownstone, but I have never opened the curtains because there's a decent amount of foot traffic in the area. The apartment comes with a PA system that looks like an old school landline that I can use to buzz in visitors through the front doors of the building. My apartment is right by the entrance, so I can hear people open and close the doors to the building. My schedule is pretty erratic, and I'm home at weird times of the day, which makes this even more unnerving. A couple of weird incidents happened prior to this night that I brushed off. First, the phone would ring at random hours, only a few times before it stopped. It would happen with no pattern, at 3 a.m. or in broad daylight. I would ignore it since I wasn't expecting visitors, and I chalked it up to someone having the wrong room. Following this, one night at around 2 a.m., someone called the PA phone, and when I ignored it, they kept calling every few minutes. In between calls, I could hear tapping on my window and banging on the entrance to the building. This went on for an hour or so before they gave up. Again, I figured it was just a drunk person who forgot their keys, and I felt bad, but I lived by myself, and I figured it would be a bad idea to let someone in the building I didn't know. The final event. I was watching an episode of The Haunting of Hill House around 1 a.m., and as it ended, my cat sat up and stared at the door. I'm now thinking to myself, great, I'm haunted, and wondering how much longer I have left to live when I realize someone is quietly trying to turn my doorknob to see if it's unlocked. The building and the door are pretty old. The door has 2 deadbolts and a chain, but the knob itself doesn't lock. So I get up and for whatever reason grab a knife instead of calling the cops, and when the person tries to open the door, obviously the deadbolts held just fine, but the person kept standing there, shuffling around and twisting the knob. I stood there, all 5'3" of me, with this kitchen knife listening to this person decide what to do, and that's when I hear them walk away and exit the building. I laid in bed awake for a few hours, and in the morning I waited until my neighbors left, and then I started my day. Almost home, invader? Let's not meet. A few years ago, my roommate and I lived on the 3rd floor of the backside of an apartment building. She was in the process of moving out, so it was mostly just my dog, George Washington, and I. I knew just about every neighbor in my building, and from what I knew, they were super chill. In order to understand this story, I need to explain the way my apartment was set up. In order to get to the door to enter our apartment, you would have to pass by my window, which was a very long window in my bedroom. I have never had any issues until about 2 a.m. on a Saturday. I heard footsteps on the walkway outside my window and saw a shadow pass by it. I'm usually a groggy person when I first wake up, but ever since it had just been me, I was more aware of my surroundings, so it jolted me awake. I had a nightstick under my bed, so I grabbed it and debated on what to do for the next 30 seconds. I opened up my bedroom door quietly and started to notice the handle jiggle ever so lightly. Clearly, I knew I could either A, shit my pants, B, get attacked, or C, scare the person off. Choice A seems the most likely for my personality type, but choice C it was. I turned on the outside light, kicked the outside door as loud as I could, and screamed a string of words that would make a sailor blush. I heard footsteps turn and quickly walked the other way. I called my stepdad, who thankfully lived close by. He came by to check on me and wanted to stay with me, but I said it would be fine, and off he went. The next morning, I got up and got ready for church, not really thinking of the night before. I returned home shortly after and was texting on my phone as I reached to get my keys and put them into the lock on my door. I couldn't find the keyhole though, so I looked up and noticed that my entire lock had been bashed in. It hadn't really set in what had happened yet, so I opened the door and looked in. A lot of my stuff was gone. Televisions, computers, jewelry, etc. Luckily, they left my dog there and unharmed. The irony is, I got him to be my best friend and a guard dog. He at least fulfills one of those roles. I'll let you figure out which. My brain caught up to my surroundings, so I grabbed George and ran outside to call police. They came out, guns drawn, and they cleared my apartment. They never found out who did it, and in the end, it worked out okay. A lot of the jewelry they stole was from an ex that I had intentions of pawning anyway, and the renter's insurance covered that, so I got some sweet new technology upgrades. However, I am still very unsettled internally about that night and day, particularly about that night. I replay it often, and often wonder what would have happened if I had not woken up, or if the person hadn't been so easily turned away. It's also very unsettling to know that they were watching me, waiting for me to leave for church so that they could break in. Ever since that day, I keep my head on a swivel and pay extremely close attention to my surroundings, particularly when I get home.